The Buckeyes are 1-0. More importantly, the Dodgers are the world champions. It's Ohio State Buckeyes live for a 77th edition here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please bring your comments. We don't need Steve having to jump in the live chat constantly, letting everyone know. Bring those comments and questions. Bring them on. We've got football to talk about for the first time in forever. Kevin will give you the floor first and foremost because for the first time since 1988, you're a world champion.
When it comes to the Dodgers, that's right. I mean, I'm really happy for Clayton Kershaw. I mean, first ballot Hall of Famer with all of these instances of where they just came up a little bit short. Finally got that gigantic weight off of his back. It was a fun series to watch. I've already had people tell me it was lowly rated in the on TV, but I don't care. I bought a shirt. I bought a hat. I'll have them soon. I'll be sure to debut them on one of the Mark Rogers shows. And I'm a little tired now. I was up until about 2 a.m. watching post-game coverage, but it was worth it. It surely beat the alternative, and I've been there a lot over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I tell my son all the time I root for the Dodgers because it's good for baseball, and he doesn't get that. It's good for baseball. All right, let's talk Ohio State coming off a 52-17 drubbing of Nebraska, although I thought the game was quite a bit closer, actually, than the score would indicate in regards to the competitiveness on the field. Steve, we're going to start with you because I've got certain areas I want to hit on, but I want to get your three individual takes before I hit you on these three categories. So, Steve, your overall impressions.
Yeah, I'll hit it pretty quick because I know everybody's got a lot they want to talk about. It seemed to me like people expected this to be Ohio State versus Bowling Green or Buffalo. And what it was Ohio State versus Nebraska, a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team with comparable talent at many positions. Now, not the same. And, most of their teams, 3 stars and 4 stars. Most of Ohio State's team is 4 stars and 5 stars. And yet a lot of that gets kind of neutralized when you go out there to play an 11-on-11 football game. I think people lost sight of that with some of the unrealistic expectations. They beat them 48-7 last year in Nebraska, 41 points. This year they beat them 52-17, and it was 35 points. And there were a couple breakdowns on defense early in the game. They gave up 176 yards in the first quarter and a half, 2 touchdown drives, I think 78 and 75 yards, and had everybody kind of scratching their head. It was 14-all with 8 minutes to go in the first half. But Ohio State, in something that has been a hallmark in recent years, played the end of the second quarter flawlessly and then came out in the third quarter. And I love this is my favorite go-to phrase. They slammed the car door on their head to start the third quarter, and it got to 38-14 pretty quickly after a fumble return for a touchdown, and it was all over but the shouting at that point. So Justin Fields, nothing short of fabulous, 20 of 21 passing. And I had a buddy one time who made 24 out of 25 free throws in a, elementary or middle school free throw shooting contest. And as he's walking to the car, his dad says, but that one you missed, just, it was right there. And that's what everybody was talking about, that he had Olave wide open on a touchdown and got just a little too much air underneath of it. Leonardo DiCaprio Boodle came back and made the play after he had already been beaten for a deep touchdown by Garrett Wilson. So he knew his bacon was on the firing line right there. He got back there somehow and upended Olave for the one incompletion of the day for Chris Fields. He also ran the ball for over 50 yards and a touchdown. So I would call it a B+, A- effort, depending on which unit you're looking at. And again, it was a Big Ten game. This was not UAB or Youngstown State. This was a Big Ten conference game, and Ohio State did very well, I thought, in opening the season last Saturday.
I thought the worst throw Fields made was the one to Rutgers that led to a pass interference. That was So he deserved an incompletion for that one. So maybe that's a little bit of the ball don't lie there, where maybe Olave could have caught the one that he didn't. But that throw to Rutgers should at least be acknowledged as being a bad one. But that was the only bad throw he had all day, and it really was just. You could see the fear in the way Nebraska played those receivers. I saw one picture, a screen grab of a safety like 20 yards downfield pre-snap, just because they were afraid of what Chris Olave was going to do. And you can watch this game and just think, why is Ohio State even bothering running the ball? Because they could throw the ball whenever they want, however they wanted to do it, whenever, to whomever. And then you see on third downs or whatever, and fourth down, and you're like, well, Garrett Wilson's going to get the ball here. And I thought he had a great debut in the slot. Defensively, the two quarterback runs, I think, accounted for 40% of all of Nebraska's rushing yards. The first drive by Luke McCaffrey, you saw before the snap, Baron Browning is stumbling, trying to get into position, and the ball gets snapped. He immediately gets blocked. I think Marcus Hooker misses the tackle, and then off McCaffrey goes. Later towards the end of the third quarter, Adrian Martinez scrambles for 40-some yards or something like that for the other big gainer. But other than that, I mean, they held Dedrick Mills to like 30 yards rushing on 10 carries. The running backs didn't really do anything. It was 2 drives for Nebraska, and then a carry, a scramble later on by Adrian Martinez. And other than that, I thought the defense played pretty well. There's always going to be issues. I thought it was interesting. We talked to Marcus Hooker today. He said it took them a little bit of time after that first drive. They were still in practice mode, and it took them a little bit of time to get out of that. 4 drives or four plays on that first drive, and they score a touchdown. And I guess that certainly looked like practice mode. Then I guess that justifies, or that explains that first drive, because they were a little bit slow. But that's also the first game, jitters and just feeling each other out, Kevin.
Yeah, you guys have really hit upon a lot of the points there. I think the player I was looking to potentially have a big game for them, Wan'Dale Robinson, was largely held in check in the game as well. Nothing that really jumped out to me when I went back and watched the game a couple of times. I even had to go to the roster and make sure I had his number right, because I'm like, I don't see this guy. A lot of people wanted to compare him to being a Rondale Moore type of player. Ohio State wishes it would have held Rondale Moore to what they were able to bottle up Wan'Dale Robinson for. Yeah, I agree that the pass to Rutgers probably should have been, just even though there was a penalty that was kind of a soft penalty that negated an incompletion, probably should have been one there. Over on Buckeye Grove, a lot of people have been clamoring for Steel Chambers to ascend up the depth chart because they felt he had more wiggle and looked better. But I've gone through a lot of openers for Ohio State in terms of just when they do start a season, especially with a new running back, and it wasn't, it's not always a smooth transition at this point. But we've heard so much about how great this line's going to be, this offensive line. A lot better at pass pro than the run blocking, in my opinion, and watching the game back. I think it'll get there, but, Penn State certainly provides its share of challenges, and I won't get ahead of myself. But, I'm probably around a B-plus effort in terms of how I felt about Ohio State's performance, all things considered.
I'll just redirect really quick. Again, you had 6 new starters on the Ohio State defense and a couple new starters on the offensive line. You had a lot of guys who played more plays in that game than they'd ever played before, and probably in some instances more plays in that game than they'd ever played in their entire life previously at this level. And so it's going to look a little wonky at times. And you did not have a preliminary game or two to work out some of those kinks. And for them to come through it the way they did, not very many penalties, no turnovers, I don't believe. Kind of a crisp, on the whole, somewhat of a crisp game. I mean, yeah, there were a couple breakdowns. Nebraska was about 25 minutes good, whereas Ohio State was about 60 minutes good, in my opinion. And that's kind of the difference. And I think that is something that's going to be borne out. And we see it with Clemson. We see it with Alabama. They're 60 minutes good. Teams may play them tough for 25, 30, 40, 45 minutes, but the teams that they play don't have the depth, the size, or the speed that they have. And I think the same thing applies at Ohio State, that you just wear them down eventually and beat them, in the final 20 minutes of the game, which is kind of how it happened.
As we continue to get cranked up here, I want to remind everyone that we've got three of the very best here in Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove on Rivals, Tony Gerdeman from Buckeyes Scoop. The super chats available in regards to them donating their time each and every week for our Buckeyes show that's been going on now for 77 weeks. So before we get to the questions, because Razorback fan number one has his bullet points right in order of mine, so I want to hit you guys up with a running game. But before we hit that, Tony, you had outlined Chris Olave's status before we started to record. Of course, he was sandwiched in the second half after turning in over a 100-yard effort. So the latest on Chris Olave.
Well, Ryan Day didn't give us any kind of update, just said that they would monitor him. Garrett Wilson said he was looking good, and he totally expected him to play. So at this point, we were told sources have indicated that he practiced a little bit yesterday in a protective jersey, so he can't be hit or anything like that. But right now, it looks like things are full go or will be full go for Chris Olave. At least they hope to. For me, it never looked like a concussion. It looked like a stinger issue to me. But, I am hardly a doctor. I am only sort of a doctor. But at this point, I think he's going to play. Day didn't even seem that concerned about him after the game. He said he looked fine. He was talking to him, but they would know more on Sunday. And, of course, we talked to Day on Monday, and he doesn't get into the injuries. That's when or Tuesday, rather, and that's when Garrett Wilson told us that he was looking fine. So I would expect him to play. Day said if he doesn't, they'll just move some guys around.
The only permanent note I keep here from show to show is to direct all medical questions to Tony. That's pretty much the only staple on this show that I stand by each and every week.
Tony,
Smart.
Tony has his doctorate. It's in humor. He's one of the funniest people I think I've ever met. And you all may not experience that here on this forum, perhaps, but behind the scenes, he's very funny. Noon is also one of the funniest people I've ever met. So, yeah, if we could do an uncensored, it'd probably rate better than the real show. But
well, unfortunately, I'll be very serious about this. One little portion of it is that I have to catch some of those on the rewatch because our mics cancel. This system cancels out the mic sometimes, and sometimes I miss the humor, and I'm like, I didn't even hear that the first time because the mics are canceling. And then sometimes they're just too smart for the rest of us, and it's like 30 seconds later, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good one. So we've got the running game coming to the forefront here, and the two concerns for me. And I'm not going to blow them out of proportion because, as Kevin said, this is supposed to be one of the best offensive lines in the country, and it looks like the pass pro is a little ahead of the run game. They didn't move Nebraska, an inexperienced Nebraska defensive front, off the ball in short yardage situation time after time after time after time. And number two, the stable of running backs is deep, so I have no issues with they can bring in three guys, but there is no J.K. Dobbins, I don't think, on that roster.
No, I will agree with you there. What I will say is we talked about the first game jitters or just the first game things are tougher. Last year against FAU, that was the case. J.K. Dobbins was held to 91 yards. Remember in 2014, Ezekiel Elliott didn't have 100 yards until like later on, 3 or 4 or 5 games before things really started to blossom. He may have had one in there, but even Eddie George, 99 yards rushing in his first game in 1995 when he won the Heisman. There's just certain it takes a little bit of time sometimes with those first games, and I think everyone to a man is saying that's what the issues were here. However, I'll still keep going back to what I always say about Trey Sermon. Why was Why didn't he play for Oklahoma before he was injured? Why didn't he get the ball against Texas? Master Teague, I think we kind of know what he is. He said he's more agile. Maybe it takes a little bit more time for him to show that with his Achilles. And also, you also got, Trey Sermon coming off the injury. So there's some issues there. Marcus Crowley still working back. I'm with everybody else, though. I would like to see more of Steel Chambers.
Yeah,
Kevin, either one.
Yeah, I was kind of doing multiple things. I didn't see the green light to go ahead. It was at some points it looked like they were running in sand a little bit. They just didn't seem like they were getting out there and firing off. They just didn't. It wasn't that I didn't see a lot of holes there. I just didn't think that the backs really we talked about getting out of practice mode or whatnot. It just didn't look as explosive as I've seen Master Teague looking in the past. You wonder, are there any ill effects of his injury that happened over the spring? I went and watched a lot of tape of Trey Sermon when he was at Oklahoma. Maybe not the same back there. It's going to be a heck of a challenge here in week 2 as they go and play on grass at Penn State, going against a team that last year averaged allowing, I think it was 95 yards a game on the ground, but then Ohio State turns around and runs for I think it was like 270 something or whatnot. I don't think we're going to see that type of output here against Penn State per se, but I think that now that these guys have had an opportunity to get out there, we've seen a little bit of a rotation or whatnot. I've always said that, a running back needs to build up a little bit of a lather. They're going to be better in carries 9 through 13 than they are 2 through 6 or anything like that. I don't think there are going to be a lot of questions on, well, am I going to get to play? How much am I going to get to play? Sermon and Teague had almost the identical amount of carries. I think now it's just going to be they're going to be able to be a little bit more instinctual. Whether or not we see more Steel Chambers in that rotation, I guess that remains to be seen. Everybody's gotten some opportunities to go with the ones, but the running game will fix itself. And, even if it doesn't necessarily take that huge step forward, let's not forget, they ran for a good amount of yards. It was just very pedestrian yards. But they've got Rutgers and Maryland, world beater Rutgers now, who's sitting 1-0 and has the chance of being 2-0 after going in a 1-0 game against, I believe it was Indiana this week. But I think that those games will allow them to cure a lot of things that are ailing the team, going against teams that certainly on paper are a couple weight classes below.
Teague, to me, just seems kind of stiff. He is not going to hit the hole and give you the Barry Sanders lateral 3 steps and get into a new running lane and go. He is pretty much going straight ahead into whatever is there. And so you just have to kind of accept. I mean, I would call him Raymond Harris, but I don't even think Raymond Harris was quite this stiff. He just seemed to run very upright and very stiff in the game. And of course, he's coming back off of an injury. We don't know, if he's cutting it loose just yet or not. But effective at times and got some tough yards. I thought once Sermon kind of warmed up a little bit in the second half, he looked like he was getting a little closer to what they need out of him. He nearly broke one going toward the Nebraska sideline and pounded the ball the one time because he was one step away from about a 30-yarder probably. Chambers did not play until late in the third quarter. It was 38-17, and the Nebraska defense was pretty much demoralized and beaten at that point. So then you put a younger guy in there who's fresh and athletic, and we saw a great burst out of him. I have been around football coaches for a very long time, and I can tell you that when Ohio State is going to play Penn State, they ain't putting Steel Chambers in the game to start the game and risk a fumble on their own 25-yard line. They're going with the tried and true guys who are veterans with ball security. And I'm not accusing Steel Chambers of being a fumbler. What I'm saying is you don't put a young guy in a position like that if you don't have to. I mean, a few years ago, they had to play J.K. Dobbins because they didn't have anybody else. But in this instance, you've got veterans, and that's who you will lean harder with in the first and probably second quarters of this game. And if there's a chance for Steel Chambers to get in there and do something, then he may. Or if in the first quarter and a half they can't get a positive yard, then maybe you put him in there as a changeup as well. But you're not going to start the game with him having the ball, deep in their own end and risk something bad happens. So a lot of thoughts about Penn State, but I think, again, I came out of this game with Nebraska. I picked it something like 45-14. I know everyone was kind of in that realm. The line to me was surprising at 26 points. But, they handled it no problem. It looked iffy in the second quarter when it was 14-all. But then you had that explosion of what would have been 24 points, like that, and the game was pretty much over.
Yeah, and the coaches and the running backs have been talking about ball security big time in this game. That's been a focus. So I would expect the veterans to have the ball for most of those carries while the game is still in doubt as well, because as Jim Tressel would say and Urban Meyer have said, if you end every drive with a kick, you're doing it right. And if they do that against Penn State, I don't see how they lose.
So if we stay with the running game, the other component in this is Justin Fields, and the way Nebraska set up the defense, and Joel Klatt outlined this and expects this to carry forward. The defenses are going to force the ball into the hands of Justin Fields as a runner. So Nebraska might have been doing defenses and teams a favor down the line, not necessarily themselves, but has Ryan I believe his name's Ryan Day. Has he addressed to the media? And I'm going to preempt this by saying I'm guessing no, because of what your feedback's been on how he answers questions.
Not on addressing, we don't hear anything.
Defense is forcing the ball into Justin Fields' hands, but they want to keep it out. How do they game plan to get the ball into the running back's hands and keep him down to 6 or 7 carries and not the 15 he had on Saturday? Kevin, anybody?
I was going to say, I think it's really going to kind of be a week-to-week thing, depending on what the defense gives them at that point. And, we talked to Josh Myers earlier this week, and he'd like to see Justin Fields take about a negative amount of hits. He doesn't want his quarterback being touched or whatnot. But, of course, Justin Fields, the super competitor, he's going to go out and do whatever it takes to win. And we kind of had a chance to talk to him on the call today about his, I think, 17-yard touchdown run with the spin move or whatnot. And I think it was Garrett Wilson who was in the back of the end zone, but Fields saw the green grass and went or whatnot. They're going to have to find some ways to get the running game to take some of that onus off of him for feeling like he needs to carry the ball. But, when it comes to anything structural or what the plans are going to be, we're going to be the last to know in terms of them telling us. We have some ideas of what's going on or so on and so forth. But, we go into last season and Fields had to carry the ball a lot again down the stretch, and Penn State was the second to last game of the season. I certainly remember how quiet that stadium got when he laid there on the turf for more than a second. It's I don't know. They're just going to have to keep growing, and we see more growth from week 1 to week 2 than any other stretch of the season, in my opinion. And I think now that they have 4 quarters of live action of where they weren't whistling early and not taking guys down to the ground and whatnot, I think we'll see some steps forward. Regardless of how good Shaka Toney and some of these Jason Oweh and some of these other guys for Penn State are up in their front 7.
Yeah, I'm going to say I agree with the panel that you don't want to put him in harm's way too much, but sometimes it's just too much to pass up. Like he saw in the red zone, he could throw the ball to Garrett Wilson for a touchdown, or he could keep it himself and get it in there just as easily. It wasn't necessarily easily. He had to bounce off a guy, but what he did, brought back memories of Braxton Miller, certainly against Virginia Tech. Justin Fields is a big, durable dude, and he was running over guys at one point. We all remarked, look at the vegetarian out there running over people. And that was great to see, certainly. But again, Penn State from last year brings up the memory that he injured his knee when he was tackled late in that game, and it did kind of cast a pall over everything that happened after that. They fell behind to Wisconsin. He went out of the Michigan game for a moment, and certainly wasn't 100% when they played Clemson. So it is a push-pull, no question. And I go back to J.T. Barrett. He would never run it against UAB or I'm having a real hard time coming up with bad teams.
You're big on UAB today, Steve.
Tulsa.
Yeah, I'm big on UAB for some reason. In 2017, they played Army and UNLV. Those are my examples. Then Army
UNLV was real bad.
Yeah, Army and UNLV, and you wouldn't see Barrett carry the ball at all in those games. And then they get into a nut cruncher, and it's like 20, 25 carries for him. And it's like, they win the game, but is there a better way? And I think you're going to see teams back out of the box a little bit too. If they're going to complete passes at the efficiency rate that he did and have some bombs in there too, you're going to have to pull a hat out of the box eventually because he's just going to carve you up. And, Penn State only gave up 41 yards rushing or something along those lines. It was like 22 carries for 41 yards or 45 against Indiana. And, they had Stevie Scott. Now, they did sack Penix, I think, 3 times, but and 2 of those were Shaka Toney, who we brought up. I think that is something Ohio State's got to be concerned about, establishing the run in this game year in and year out. They usually are able to do it, but until they do it against a quality team, we don't know if this team's capable of doing it. But I see both sides of it. Tone, what do you think about the great Fields running the ball debate?
Well, I think he ran the ball last week because they needed yards on the ground because it was
they weren't getting them.
They weren't getting them, so they had to get them from somewhere. And as long as he could move the chains, that's great. I'd like to maybe see some more of the actual reading rather than just the straight handoffs that were getting blown up. Or maybe I think they ran a couple more RPOs then to kind of slow down the defensive ends in the second half. And there's ways to freeze those guys without actually getting him hit. But I also thought it was interesting. Josh Myers talking about how, they don't want him getting hit because teams kind of twist his ankles and grab at him while he's in the pile. Fields said today that stuff does happen, and he obviously doesn't like it. And Myers and the offensive line are going to be there as quickly as possible to make sure that it doesn't happen this year. So I think he probably took some shots against Nebraska. There were, I don't want to say dirty shots, but Ryan Day said after the game he doesn't think Nebraska is coached that way. If that infers anything into what Day thought of maybe some of those targeting calls and some of the other things that happened. So every time he gets hit, you're like, is he going to get up? Is he going to get up? And that's just part of the deal of having a quarterback who's going to run the ball 8 to 20 times a game. Last year against Penn State, I think he had like 21 carries, rushed for over 100 yards, but the sacks brought him back down to like 60 or 70. And you got to move the chains, and he can do that. So, you don't want him doing it against Rutgers and Maryland, but you do have to win these games.
Just about every time I hear Scott Frost talk, he basically is still in the process of weeding out players on that roster in that locker room that he doesn't want to be there. And maybe that's a little bit of that. I don't think that's the primary focus, guys twisting ankles and knees in the piles, but just that type of player and the guy that's not going to grind and doesn't think that they can win and just wants to show up against Ohio State and we stay within 20 points. He talks about that every time I hear the guy speak.
He even was talking about his kicking game and how it's going to be better because they got rid of guys from last year. It's like, okay. Dump some dead weight.
He was not left a very good cupboard, and it sounds like there were some old packages that were ready to be tossed at that point that they needed to clear out space. But the problem is that they just have not been able to get a footing in recruiting. They don't have a natural recruiting ground. They can't go in and recruit Texas and Oklahoma playing in the Big Ten. Prior to Scott Frost, they had this whole Calibraska thing where they were going to recruit the state of California. some of those guys made it. Some of them never made it. Nobody stayed really. So, kind of back to the drawing board, but, credit him for trying to clean things up and turn some things around. But, at some point it's going to be year 5. If he gets to that point, they're going to be all his kids. And then it's going to be him having to clean up his own errors and not, what he inherited from previous administrations.
So we come on here every week, regardless of the team, actually. And with Ohio State, it's more difficult than the others, and pick apart any kind of negative we can possibly latch onto. But, and what else can you say about Justin Fields? But if you guys can possibly, because you've been watching Ohio State football for as long as I have, just my goodness, you guys pointed out the one pass that wasn't perfect. He threw 21 passes. And my goodness, just everyone was there and looked beautiful. Like you see really good quarterbacks out there in college and on Sundays that don't throw the best ball. They're really good at what they do, and it's on time and it's on the money. But man, it even looks good. Like everything he does just looks good. He looks the part. Like this guy is more than fulfilling what everybody expected.
Just go watch a random JT Barrett game and see the difference in the passing game. It's like the 2016 Michigan game where because you expect now, and with Dwayne Haskins as well, you expect every single pass to be pretty much on target. And you could see, you go back and watch some of these JT Barrett games where it's the easiest pass and it's skipping to the receiver. And it's and he was the best of all time until the guys after him.
Hey, what about the 2017 Penn State game, fourth quarter? That was one of the best quarters of passing that I'd seen, and that was the outlier. Now that's the expectation.
3 years ago today, that game. Tonight.
Ohio State's passing offense, and this goes back to Pryor, Braxton Miller, Barrett, it was always station to station. They would throw a forward pass, and it was usually a receiver crouching down near the ground, catching it in one spot. And if they're able to then turn and pivot and get 5 or 6 yards after the catch, you thought, oh my God, what a great play that was, that type of thing. And those guys had the mobility to keep plays alive. And okay, first guy's covered, second guy's covered, I'll roll out. Third guy, dump it off, get it to him over the middle, whatever it is, move the chains. They were efficient in that regard, but it was not what you'd say an NFL passing attack needs to look like. Fields is hitting guys in stride, boom, 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 boom. And I mean, I'm not saying the receivers don't bail him out time and again, because there are a few of those, including the touchdown to the freshman, Jackson Smith-Njigba, where he reached out of bounds, like 2 feet, 3 feet out of bounds, leaning out of bounds, and somehow still got his right foot down in bounds, is one of the most awe-inspiring plays I can recall, physics-defying, I think, almost, where your body is leaned one way and you somehow are able to still get your foot down in bounds, was just stunning. But 92%, or 90, I don't know what it was, 93%, 95% completion percentage for him in the first game. I was told there'd be no math.
You brought it up.
Yeah, that's
95.2 to be exact.
Yeah, that's just uncanny. And again, he's looking at a season where he's probably going to complete 70% maybe or more. There's going to be some down games, I assume, at some point, particularly when they play into December outside and it's, blowing and snowing and whatever. But you just get the sense that if Ohio State, needs to pick up a 5-yard first down or whatever, they're going to do it. And they can do it in an array of different ways, and really didn't even involve the tight ends all that much in this game. And that's uncharted territory that they can still get to.
I'm dating myself to a certain extent, but I didn't even watch this game live. So I'm not quite this old, but I watched so many old NFL playoff games, and this was in the Super Bowl, that I instantly, when he made that play in the back of the end zone, I thought of the play where, again, it's not physically like this, but it appears like this. Like when Dr. J made that scoop under the basket where it looks like, how in the world do you travel from one side of the lane to the other out of bounds? Len Swan in the Super Bowl against the Steelers or against the Cowboys looked like he was like his entire body was over the white of the sideline, but he somehow landed in bounds with 2 feet. Garrett Wilson, now we knew how good he was, but it looked like they intentionally came out, unless he was just beating his coverage this well coming out of the gate. It looked like that they were intentionally wanting to get the ball in his hands, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, that's the focal point of the passing game is that slot guy, and that's why in 2018, the two slot guys combined for 160 receptions in Paris Campbell and KJ Hill. So that tells you the kind of attention that gets, and his 7 receptions, and then Jackson Smith, his backup, he had a catch in there as well, 2 catches, targeted another time where he was then targeted by the Nebraska defense. And so, yeah, that's like the focal point of the offense. That's why when Kevin Wilson talked back in the spring or whatever about the 130 receptions that they got Ryan Broyles out of the slot, and how there's a reason they put Garrett Wilson in there. It's because they want to get him the ball as much as possible, and it gives them favorable matchups, and he can do more after the catch. He's more explosive than KJ Hill. KJ Hill is more of the station to station that Steve is talking about. Garrett Wilson is a guy who can play any position and make any catch from any angle, and then if he comes down with the ball in bounds, can make you miss and then run by you. And so that he's almost like the perfect weapon in there. And the backup, Jackson Smith and Jigba, is another version of him, of Garrett Wilson. And he's just a freshman, and he's going to be very, very good. I wouldn't be surprised if Smith and Jigba leaves as the all-time leading receiver in Ohio State history. Now, the only problem is he's going to have to do it in 3 years as opposed to the 4 years that KJ Hill had. But the guys they've got on the inside, they're difference makers, and we won't see Mookie Cooper necessarily until next year. He's another guy that they love, and yeah, just there's no limit to what Garrett Wilson can do this year. The only limit is that there's only 11 games maximum, basically, or else I think I was saying before there was a pandemic, he could be looking at 100 catches this year just because of how much they can focus the ball to the inside guys. And he's, if they would have played 3 games before this one, he might already have, already have 30 catches this season with the 7 that he got against Nebraska. And it's unfortunate that he can't realize his full potential this season, but man, he is really, really, really good. And he's got some guys behind him too.
Yeah, I look at the receivers that they have right now, and it's hard to compare them to previous classes without it sounding like you're disparaging guys. But, there would be times that Ben Victor would be out there running free, and for some strange reason would jump up and have the ball bounce off his hands and then his helmet and then his chest and then off his hands again and then fall sadly to the earth. Yeah.
And you were just hoping his leg didn't snap. Especially his first year.
He was like a baby deer out there taking his first steps, Cav.
Talking to him in high school, and I was just like, God, he's so slight. And then it's like, well, you get him on a nutritional plan and everything else, and he'll bulk up. That never happened. But, you got to, if you're Justin Fields or, any quarterback in the Ohio State system now with the receivers that they've got, you've got to feel a tremendous amount of success because your catch radius is not right there. The catch radius is just so much larger now at this point. These guys have such great ball skills. They can react so well to the ball and everything else, and it makes you look better. And then, it's like that baseball player that's, hitting everything. It looks like a beach ball coming into them. So, it's just one thing feeds off of another. And, Garrett Wilson, just for, the skill set that he brings, there are still people I know in Central Texas that are pissed off that he escaped Texas's reach and that he's at Ohio State. I mean, I think he really has the potential of being special. And, we've all talked about Chris Olave this and Chris Olave that. And, I'm not selling one bit on CO2, but Garrett Wilson really could prove to be the freak of this, of the 2020 season.
Another freak, he plays for Penn State, is Shaka Toney. And there was one particular series in that game, and we can just talk about the Indiana-Penn State. We could talk about that for an hour because that was the most important result of the weekend. It was the most just the strangest game and the most exciting finish of the season by far, thus far, at 36-35, that Penn State gave up 211 yards of total offense in that game. And considering that was an overtime game, so Indiana obviously had the 25 yards of offense in the overtime, and they went 75 yards on the last drive that shouldn't have existed because of James Franklin. So we're at like 111 yards of total offense for Indiana going into the final drive of the game. And of course, Penn State rings up 488 themselves, 2-1 in time of possession, but they blew the ball game. But I bring up Shaka Toney because in what should have been the final drive of the game, he made 4 consecutive plays. He came off the edge, got 2 consecutive sacks, and then on third down, forced another incompletion. On fourth down, he just completely just blew up the play, and like the ball had to be just flung out of bounds. So I don't know where he's going to line up necessarily if they move him around, but that's going to be the test for that great Ohio State offensive line.
I know Nicholas Petit-Ferrer talked about it today and gave him his proper credit. Shaka Toney, a little bit undersized. I've got their depth chart here. Excuse me, 6'3", 252, redshirt senior. And he really uses his speed and his agility to get to the quarterback. And Indiana had a real problem. They had a big kid, like a 360-pound kid, trying to block him at times there at left tackle, and it got ugly a couple times where he just ran right around him. And you would hope and you would think that Ohio State's got better agility with Munford and at left tackle and Petit-Ferrer at the other. They could also have Houseman or somebody chip, as an H-back there at tight end a little bit, or a blocking back perhaps as well to help in those obvious pass situations. But I do believe Penn State's defense, in many respects, this is a no-name Penn State team. I mean, all the star power that we've known in recent years, like Micah Parsons and KJ Hamler, and earlier Saquon Barkley, certainly a couple of years ago. But, a lot of the star power is gone. Journey Brown injured. So in many respects, it seems like they've got a couple studs on each side of the ball. Toney, a defensive end. Lamont Wade's played a lot of football at safety, and he kind of cuts both ways. He had an interception in this game, but he also gave up the touchdown pass, I think, in the overtime, I believe, to basically the winning touchdown, because then they got the 2-point conversion. So kind of cuts both ways with him. But over on offense, it feels like it's a 2-man team with Clifford and the tight end, Pat Freiermuth. And then you got some young receivers, some different guys. Jahan Dotson had a pretty good game. And a freshman, Parker Washington, caught a huge touchdown in the overtime as well for Penn State. So it feels like maybe some of the star power isn't there like we've seen out of Penn State in years past. And yet, if it wasn't for some just terrible, terrible head coaching mistakes by James Franklin, they win this game. They were their own worst enemy. 3 turnovers, 10 penalties for 100 yards. They had the ball, the play you referenced, Mark, the 4th down play. They had the ball on downs at the Indiana 15-yard line with 1:47 remaining. Indiana had 1 timeout. Now, I can do this math. That's something like 107 seconds. And, 1 timeout, that means you can take time off after the 2nd down play and the 3rd down play, a total of 80 seconds. You get that down inside 10 seconds before you even have to turn it back over to them on downs on their own 15-yard line. I would take that chance as opposed to scoring. And when they did score and made it a 7-point game, I think the play there would have been to go for 2 to make it a 9-point game and put it out of reach again. But, again, I don't get paid $5 million a year to coach Penn State.
In Franklin, real quick, Tony, Franklin said after the game that they practiced that situation. So what I can't imagine is how can you practice that situation? You can inform your players of situations like that, but how do you practice that situation? Because you would have to say, okay, this situation, there's a minute 12 and they've got 2 timeouts. This situation, there's a minute 33 and they've got all timeouts. This situation, there's 42 seconds. They've got no. How in the world do you practice all those? What the lack of excuse I think that James Franklin basically has is there's a change of possession there. So you've got the entire offense right in front of you on the sidelines, on the field. They're coming out, and really not everybody on the offense needs to know what's going on, but certainly Clifford does, and whomever you're going to give the ball to, Kevon Lee or Devin Ford, and you say, do not score, do not score. So it's on the head coach, even if he practiced, even if he told them, it's the buck stops with him.
It's another example of James Franklin losing a game he shouldn't lose. And every single number in that game was pointing in Penn State's favor. All 3 of their turnovers came in the first half. And so they had enough wherewithal in the second half to limit what Indiana was doing. I mean, you mentioned Shaka Toney. I guess one of my things is pretty much that his 2 sacks came on that same drive. He had maybe he finished with 7 tackles, so he had 5 tackles throughout the game. But I guess maybe I'd like to if he would have been more consistent throughout the game. Although Michael Penix wasn't very accurate, there's no way Indiana should have or Penn State should have lost this game. And when you lose a game where I think they had 99% win probability when they had the ball back. And Steve, yeah, they should have gone for 2, but you're asking James Franklin, who clearly didn't tell his players loud enough, don't score. Now you're expecting him to have this next level of, you know what, let's just go up 9 and forget about even having to worry about going and playing defense. And but even at that point, after Indiana went 4 and out and they had no hope of moving the ball, then you give them all of the momentum back by just giving them another chance. And it was a failure in so many different ways for James Franklin, for the running game. And then I still am not sure how Indiana moved the ball down on that final drive and scored. They look like a different offense.
They had plenty of time. They had a minute 42. There was a face mask penalty early that moved them almost to midfield. And then they kept working the sideline. I mean, they were at the Penn State 30-yard line with a minute and 15 seconds to go. I mean, it wasn't a matter of are they going to score? It was a matter of how soon are they going to score? And they scored almost too soon. They scored with 20 seconds left and then botched the kickoff. I mean, Indiana, it was like Tom Allen said, I see your mismanagement of the game situation, and I raise you a mismanagement of the kickoff.
Well, to Tony's point, it's almost deflating. Go ahead, Kevin.
Because I think the biggest question was, once Indiana got the ball back, was not were they going to score the touchdown, it was would they be
going to get the 2
conversion.
Yeah.
But, as we talk about Penn State's failures and everything else, they were 0 for 3 in kicking field goals.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I'll take the Jordan Stout, 57-yarder as time expired off the board. But Jake Pinnicker missed a 25-yarder and a 47-yarder. I mean, any points in this game would have changed the fortunes there. So, I mean, it was a failure on many levels. But, at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, I've watched plenty of games of football through my life where it's like, don't let them score so you can get the ball back or whatnot. And, I just really can't believe that there wasn't something said in a huddle or whatnot. It wasn't like Penn State was in a situation where it was needing to go hurry up or whatever. You should have been able to have a nice little conversation to say, get it and get down on the 1-yard line, get down on the 3-yard line, whatever. And you could see as soon as Devin Ford crossed the end zone, he kind of tried to go back, and the damage was already done.
We saw the same thing with Antonio Pittman back in the 2009 Fiesta Bowl, where
that was Boom Heron. Boom Heron scored.
Yeah, Boom. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, where he scored, and then
they
Texas got the ball.
Too much time on the clock for McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Todd
issue
Gurley.
there was
Todd
they
Gurley.
could have run 3 plays and kicked a field goal on the final play.
Right.
They didn't need a first down. All they needed was whatever it was, a 1 or 2 point game. They needed a 3-point field goal to win the game. He scores a 6-point touchdown. They go for 2. I don't know. I don't think they got it. I think they tried to throw the ball from Beckman to Pryor or something, and it didn't work, or I don't know. But any rate, Texas allowed Ohio State to score a touchdown it didn't need and ultimately won the game. Similar scenario.
What was funny about Todd Gurley with the Falcons on Sunday is that he's done it before. Number one, meaning he's made the right play and he's stopped before the goal line. The other thing is when you're running that fast as an athlete, you should know the time to try to stop isn't the half-yard line. When you're running like a 4-3 to the half-yard line, and then he couldn't get his composure back to bring himself back. But you guys are talking about how Penn State was deflated, and of course they gave up the touchdown. I kind of thought of it the other way, how deflating it was after dominating defensively, giving up 110 yards of total offense, that Indiana scored so easily they didn't even have to convert a 3rd or 4th down on that drive. They only had 1 second down. They just went boom, 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 touchdown.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what it's going to look like, on Saturday. The line for this game is 12 points. And I just look at it and I'm kind of like, we know the history. The games are usually pretty close. Last year, the line was 18 points, I think. And I think that they won 28-17, something like that. And I mean, they had a 21-0 lead. They were cruising. And they turned it over twice, a couple fumbles in the 3rd quarter, and allowed Penn State to get it to 21-17. I'll just say this pretty quickly. If James Franklin, for all of his faults, can't get his team up to win this game, then he never will get them up to win any game, because Ohio State's beaten them 3 years in a row. 2 of those were by a single point in games that Penn State thought they had won. And they are coming off of a miserable loss at Indiana. And if they lose this game, their entire purpose of playing the season is over. They can't win the division. They will not go to a New Year's Six bowl game, and certainly not the playoff. And I mean, their goals are still out there as of today. They could still run the table and hope Indiana loses a couple times, which probably will happen, and still win the division. But if they lose this game, all pretense is over. And you may see guys opt out of the season after this because, why do I need to get hurt when we're basically playing an exhibition season at this point, and the best they can do is the Capital One Bowl or the Citrus Bowl. So, their whole reason for existence is on the line this week.
I still wonder if they have the talent to even make it matter.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. No star power. I don't see a lot of.
Well, go ahead, Tony.
Well, I was just going to say I was listening to an interview with the Penn State beat writer on my cohort Tom Orr's morning show, and he was talking about the receivers, the Penn State receivers. They're just the only playmaker is Jahan Dotson, and he's a smaller guy, and all of the other bigger guys are just possession guys who really aren't going to scare anybody. And that's the problem with, I guess, the entire Penn State offense right now. When Sean Clifford may be your most dynamic player, your most dynamic playmaker, you've got issues.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of pitch and catch between Clifford and Freiermuth. I mean, they may take some shots with Dotson, but losing Journey Brown before the start of the season, losing Noah Cain after week 1. That's not taking anything away from Devin Ford, but he's got a couple of true freshmen behind him or whatnot. I just don't see a running game that's not generated by Clifford himself. I just don't see a lot of a throw game outside of what they can do with the tight end. I mean, does Ohio State bracket a tight end? I mean, honestly, that's going to be their best weapon there. And you look at what Freiermuth did against Indiana. I mean, he was impressive, and he still had some drops. He left a lot of yardage out there on the field at that point. And we know through the years, Ohio State has had some issues with some of the prolific tight ends in the league. So If that's your pitch and catch right there between your quarterback and your tight end, and then maybe you got the Q run, I don't know if Penn State has 31, 35 points in it or whatever, and I just don't know how Ohio State is going to be held south of 35. So it's really going to take Ohio State being -2, -3 in turnover margin, or a rushed field goal that gets blocked and housed or something. It's going to take something a little freaky if all things are equal and we're not talking about a huge disparity in some of those intangibles.
Yeah, Ohio State's lucky that Greg Schiano is safely tucked away as the head coach at Rutgers, because it was the game at Iowa, the Noah Fant game there 2 years ago, that Iowa, they kind of went to their bag of tricks. They kind of got into the goodie bag there and came out with this wrinkle. It was called the tight end, who I think some people had forgotten is still an eligible receiver in college football. And I don't think Greg Schiano had taken that into account. And I think their tight ends had 4 touchdowns in that game, and probably like 15 catches or something. So, yeah, now that he's at Rutgers, we don't have to worry about that wrinkle for the Ohio State defense. Although the linebacker play for Ohio State against Nebraska was a little wanting at times, but I don't know. I guess we'll see how they rebound with a bigger game. And Freiermuth he's gonna get his. He's gonna have 6 or 7 catches. So it's just keeping him out of the end zone is the big thing.
I don't think you can fault Greg Schiano for not knowing tight ends are eligible receivers when he does not see it in practice.
Yeah, they don't throw to him in practice. It's kind of like what Ryan Day was saying, running the football. Well, our scout team only can give us so many looks and whatever. And we just, they showed us some stuff, and it took a while. The good thing is we had veterans to identify it and adapt.
I will say, go ahead, Kevin.
Bare front or whatever that Tech threw at them. What the hell is this? We've never seen this before.
What are they doing?
But I will say, Pat Freiermuth last week, 7 for 60. If that happens again this week, that's no issue. He was 6 for 40 last year against Pete Werner. Let's see what Baron Browning and Josh Proctor can do, because they're going to be certainly tested. And 7 for 60, that's a winning number for Ohio State all day long, unless it's 7 touchdowns.
That's workable.
Yeah.
Ohio State still might be able to pull out a 52-49 with what we've seen in some recent years in this series. Granted, we haven't gotten up to that type of number, and when somebody hits that 50 or 60 number, it's generally 63 and the other team has 14.
Yeah, it's great to have a tight end as a weapon, but he shouldn't be the number 1 option, and that's where Penn State is right now. And just to kind of pull together everything, what everyone said concerning Penn State personnel, I don't know that there's a team, definitely in the Big Ten, not maybe in the nation, that looks so much different after one game in regards to the perception of what they have in the personnel and, to Steve's nomenclature, star power, than Penn State minus Kane, Journey Brown, Parsons, and what they showed us with Sean Clifford. And just as an aside, I know Michael Penix, I don't know what the exact comments were, but he kind of called out and put on notice the rest of the Big Ten because of Indiana's coming. But he may want to look at the game tape and see that they were very fortunate to win that game. And the Sean Clifford making Indiana safeties and linebackers miss in the open field might be a cause of concern for the Hoosiers when they play some other teams as well, because Sean Clifford has not shown that against anybody else. And suddenly he's, Michael Vick in the open field gaining 119 yards, but he did throw his 2 customary bad picks in the first half that obviously cost them points. All right, predictions on this one. And again, you guys can point us to your sites if you don't want to leave them here. Steve.
Yeah, I just posted my game data page. I got it out of the way a little bit earlier than normal this week. I don't know. Maybe I'm on top of my work. I don't know. But 34-19 is what I said for Ohio State. That line, 12 points again. To me, there are a lot of people out there that have to have money on every game. And this one, just with so many questions, I think, at least on the Penn State side, I'm not sure that this is one where I could take a stand and pound my fist and say for certain Ohio State's going to cover 12 in this game. But I do think the athletes that Ohio State has, I mean, they're up 21-0 in this game last year at home. I think, I mean, it could be nothing to see Olave and Wilson get out early and often, and to where the final 40 minutes of this game are kind of fait accompli. So I don't know. I'm gonna say Ohio State 34-19. They make a play in the fourth quarter. It's kind of touch and go, and one of the freaks steps up and makes a play, and that's it. So that's kind of my thought on it. And I do believe Ohio State wins the game, no question in my mind. Other than Penn State, like in 2016, needs to summon something Herculean to pull off the upset, in my opinion.
I'll jump in. I normally don't want to give my prediction here. I'll give what I have now. I could change the score a little bit, but I threw 35 points out as kind of being that line of demarcation. I like Ohio State to get north of it. I don't like Penn State to approach it. I think anybody who's expecting a shutout, I know there are a lot of tried and true Ohio State fans that freak out when any points go on the board for the opposing team. Well, Penn State's going to make a couple plays. They're at home. They have 85 scholarship players. Truth of the matter is that we had them installed as the number 2 team in the Big Ten going into the season. I mean, and I don't think that what we saw at Indiana is truly going to indicate what they're about for 8 games or 7 games or 5 games or whatever we truly get based on this schedule being packed the way that it is. But I think at the end of the day, Ohio State does get north of that, but I don't think Ohio State will be as efficient as it was against Nebraska, just based on the level of athlete it's going against and things along those lines. So I'm going to say 38-17 Ohio State.
Overreaction to week ones happen way too much out there. Go ahead, Tony.
I hadn't thought about the score until you mentioned it, and for me, the baseline is Ohio State should score 31 against everybody they play. And then where are we from there? And as Steve was talking, I had it 31-20. Then as he kept talking, I'm thinking 38-20. And I that's where I'm at midweek. And I may move that up to like 45 or 41. So I'll go 38-20 simply because I think Ohio State will score 31 points against everybody. And then I'll throw in an extra touchdown because I like Ohio State's tackles, and if you give Justin Fields time, I think Ohio State will have success against these corners. And Garrett Wilson against Lamont Wade to me is a mismatch if that happens, and so there's a touchdown in there waiting to happen at some point as well. So I'll go 38-20.
My prediction on Patreon, folks, head on over there and you get the insider look. You get the betting advice from not myself, from handicappers and odds makers and so forth, and also extra bonus content. Ohio State Live with an additional like 10 minutes today. So people, I hope you appreciate it. Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, Rivals, Buckeye Grove, Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop, and everyone, again, hope you appreciate what we've got here in the expertise on Ohio State, Big Ten, and the nation. Guys, enjoy the game, and I guess there won't be any trips for you this week, or will there?
I'm going.
Kevin and I are going.
Yeah, I didn't know what the circumstances were regarding the press box capacity, but of course, I'm sure you 3 are at the top of the list.
Oh, yeah, top of the food chain.
Well, we're on the list, I'll say that.
We don't need to get into where, but yes.
No.
All right, guys, appreciate it so much.
See you
Have a
later.
good one.
Bye-bye.